sir.
The application before you today is a notice of proposed change to a previously approved development of regional impact. The property is located at the southwest quadrant of I-75 and University Parkway. This 276-acre DRI was originally approved as the Sarasota Interstate Park of Commerce, or SIPOC, and is also known as University Town Center. This aerial photograph shows the subject property outlined in yellow, and as you can see, a portion of the site is developed with approximately 457,000 square feet of commercial uses, and the balance is vacant. The development is currently approved for 1,680,000 square feet of retail uses, 220,000 square feet of office uses, 500 hotel rooms, and 1,750 multifamily dwelling units. The development order also contains a condition that requires 437 of the 1,750 dwelling units to be community housing units. It should be noted that there are no proposed changes to these land use totals. The requested changes are as follows. The first change is to delete the requirement to construct the 437 community housing units. This is found in Section B5 of the ordinance. The second change is to delete acreage allocations within Section 1.10 of the ordinance, which is the body of the ordinance. And the final change is to modify the master development plan map. I'm sorry, can I please have the Elmo at this point? I wanted to, the other way, Mark, sorry. I wanted to show the language, the primary language that's being deleted. This is Section B5 from the ordinance, the 2006 ordinance. And as you can see, it deals directly with the community housing unit provisions. There's a housing breakdown, timing of construction, establishment of sale and rental rates, and then income and eligibility standards. And then the final section has to do with unit specifications and unit types shown there. That same language is also on page 762 of your iPad. The second change, as I mentioned, has to do, I'm sorry, back to the Elmo, please. Has to do with Section 1.10 in the body of the ordinance. And you can see there that they are requesting to have the acreage allocations deleted. They're assigned to the CG district and the RMF district. That paragraph also includes another reference to the 437 affordable housing units. Those are the two areas that are to be deleted as part of this request also. And if I can go back to the PC, please. And the final change has to do with the map shown here. The map on the left, sorry. The map on the left is the current approved master development plan. The red arrow indicates the area of the map to be changed. You can see the word residential there. And then the map on the right is the proposed change to the map, whereby the word commercial is being added to that map.
So
And,
I have a question.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, I had thought residential was going to be deleted from that. You're just adding commercial, so it could be commercial or residential, yes?
That's correct. The goal is to adjust the mall building into the residential area shown there.
Okay, all right, and then the area above it again could be commercial, residential, or office, so they're not really specifically outlined areas.
That's correct. It's only the change to that small area there.
Okay.
In conclusion, on May 19th, the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council unanimously approved this NOPC request, and on June 2nd, the Planning Commission recommended denial of this request. This concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Commissioners? Commissioner Thaxton?
Mr. Leverage, what would you, how does staff characterize the proposed changes with regards to compromising the mixed-use nature of the project?
As you know, or contained in the development order, there is language that requires a minimum of 750 dwelling units and a maximum of 1,750. So that component will remain. The only thing that's being taken away here is the community housing element.
I thought the minimum of 750 was going too.
No, that part remains.
Okay, Commissioner, John, are you through?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get at here, or I'm trying to get staff's take on is there's multiple components here. Number one, we had a mixed-use project approved, and the mixed-use project was basically insured, or at least at the time, it was perceived to be insured by having a minimum number of housing units that had to be developed within the overall project. The minimum number stays, the maximum number stays as well. It was also, at the time, considered that some of the housing would be community housing. So that part is clearly being taken out, and nobody's, I don't think there's much of a difference of opinion there. The difference of opinion lies with whether or not this is still going to be a mixed-use project. Now, has there been any alteration as to the coordination and the timing of when the minimum number of residential units needs to be constructed? I mean, what I'm getting at, is there a possibility that all of the commercial could be built with none of the residential built, and then we're left with a non-mixed-use project?
There is a companion contract traveling with this development that does require construction of the commercial component, the residential component, but it is not tied to affordable or community housing in any way.
I understand that, yeah. And that residential, that contract coordinates, is that contract being modified as to when the residential units were originally contracted to be constructed with regards to the commercial?
It does tie it together, and I have a copy of that here, and Beth Carroll is here.
Changed from the original, is the original contract being changed?
That part is not. The contract that is item B today has to do directly with the community housing component to this.
Okay.
When was that contract passed?
The community housing,
No, the one that you say specifies that 750 units would have to be built.
that part is contained in the 2006 development order. It's not found in any of the associated development
I
agreements.
thought you said in answer to John's question
that
that
was
there
the
was
timing.
Okay.
There's a phasing schedule. That's what you're talking
Okay,
about.
well, what year was, what contract? Give me the date of the contract. All the contracts I have a date and then a number. And I have a bunch of them printed out, and I just wanted to see the language.
That contract should be the 2009-066 contract.
Okay, I have that in front of me. And where would I find that?
And in paragraph D, and this is not accurate. This contract is not tied to the development order itself. The development order has the language that was amended in 2009 that provides specific timeframes for commencement and completion of construction. And so it's a little different than what you see here in paragraph D.
Paragraph D refers to community housing. Where it says timing, it refers to community housing units. And there's nothing else in there other than that in paragraph D in 2009-066.
And I think what happened is an NOPC came through in 2009 that changed the development order, but the contract before you was not amended to reflect that language.
Okay, thank you. You know, it would be nice to have a reference showing us, you know, where that housing is supposed to be built. I have a similar concern to John's. I mean, aside from the community housing issue, we approved a mixed-use housing. That was really part of the deal of this whole thing, was that, you know, it had a synergy of different uses. Commissioner Barbata?
Yeah, and I think, Mark, you had a page up there that had section 110 on it, which deleted the acreage, if you want to put, on the Elmo, if you want to put that back up on the Elmo. That actually has an affirmative statement in there that would be mixed-use development. That still remains in there.
Commissioners, for the record, Tom Polk. As Mark's trying to look for that, Commissioner Thaxton, regarding your question, I think it should be noted that the residential land uses are still incorporated into the overall total, as Mark was saying earlier. In addition to that, through the rezoning, there's also requirements placed on them that have those mixed-use components in place there as well. So again, we have to look at the bigger picture when we start having that conversation with the mixed-use component. But there is no proposed changes at this time to the land use totals, so they still remain.
Mark, it was the other page.
Go ahead.
It was the other page that had section 110 on it, that had the cross out of the two acreage requirements, but it continued to leave the language in about a mixed-use development. There it is right there. So if you read it, SIPOC DRI will be developed as a mixed-use development. That will include commercial general development, residential, multifamily, plain unit development.
Yeah, but all the numbers are X'd out.
In what, if I may, Commissioner Patterson,
there,
what controls, to get back to your question of timing, is this subparagraph B that has specific dates for construction commencement and completion, and that was probably the newest language put in place in 2009 as part of that NOPC.
And it's all crossed out.
Right, that's intended to be deleted today also.
Well, maybe the developers can talk to what remains and show it to us.
And again, we're talking about the community housing portion is the only portion of the housing deleted from the project.
That's correct.
The remaining housing component stays.
Right, the 1,750 units will remain.
Right, but again, the 1,750 are up to, they're not,
But
there's
with a
no
floor of 750. There's a floor of 750.
Okay, that's what
correct.
I was looking for,
Oh, no,
was the
this is-
language that actually said
Floor
that.
750.
1,700. The part that really hasn't been answered
Is when?
for me yet is, how are the two coordinated with regards to timing? That's the,
Maybe we can have the developer tell us what the timing is on that, or,
Well, and that's partly dependent on what it's in, too, because, you know, there's language in whatever document it's in that might speak to that.
The timing for all the development was to occur in Phase 2 of the project,
The timing for all the residential development?
for all the residential.
Has there been any change to the timing? Forget when it is. Has there been any change to the timing, the coordinated timing between the residential and the commercial components of the development from then to now? I mean, are we changing any of that timing today?
Well, it's being eliminated. Only the affordable is being eliminated, and I believe if approved today, it would be open-ended.
Well, and it's the affordable that had some very specific timeframes attached to it. That's
Yeah, I guess that's.
At least my impression.
I guess one of the concerns is, if there is, like I said, like I started this conversation off, there's two parallel discussion here. One has to do with the community housing, and one has to do with the timing of the mixed use, which is residential to commercial. I'm only talking about the latter, the timing of the commercial to the residential. We understand that the minimum and maximum of the residential units that are proposed remains unchanged. Does the timing in which the phasing mechanism for the residential to the commercial, has that been changed, and how has it been changed?
The timing is tied to the community housing element.
Thank you.
However, there is a build-out date of 2014. Phase 2 is between now and 2014, and they are to be required to construct a minimum of 750 units. You'll need to perhaps ask them from their business plan standpoint when they plan on constructing those units, but it is still part of the equation for no better terms. And there is a build-out date along with that.
Can someone give me the page number that we were at where it showed the removal of the community housing timing?
That should be 762 on your iPad.
Thank you.
okay. You have more to your report, I assume? No? Okay, then let's go ahead and go to the developers. I have cards from Todd Mathis, Ed Vogler, and Paul Blackadder. Are there any other folks that are part of your team?
There are other members of our team, but I think those are the ones that would present, except for a specific question.
Okay. You have 20 minutes collectively, and
Thank you.
if
I think
that's
we can
not
be more,
enough, we'll talk.
Yeah, I think we can be more expeditious than that, and I think answering direct questions would be also part of our expectation. My name is Ed Vogler. I have filled out a card. I'm here today to, along with our team, answer all of these questions. Our team consists of Paul Blackadder, our project manager. I think you know Paul pretty well, and Randy and Sean Benderson, of course, Todd Mathis, Director of Development, Richard Franco, Betsy Benak, and Derek Watts. So we have our full team, both design and implementation, and I think we'll be able to answer any question that you want, including business plan questions. However, there is a context, as your questions indicate. There's a context for this whole question. And I want to jump directly into it, except I was hoping that I could talk to you a little bit about what's happened in the last few years. This has been a very active period of time. We've worked aggressively on everything that you can do that is not a town center because of the absence of a marketplace for that. But some of the elements of that are most important is the ongoing communication with the department store tenants that we want to bring to Sarasota. This is something that happens monthly, ongoing dialogue, keeping their focus on this project and this community. Because each of these department store retailers are national in scope, and they will have several opportunities presented to them around the country. We want to make sure that they say yes to Sarasota. And that takes effort and commitment and skill and diligence, and that's been exhibited. We have regular and consistent neighborhood meetings for all of the affected properties around this property, most notably the Meadows, which we've done for 6 or 7 years. I've participated myself in this project for a long time, been to a lot of public hearings, and I've never heard one public opposition to the elements of this project. Now, today, we're talking about an emotional issue concerning community housing and commitments, and we need to get through that. But one of the things that hasn't changed about the commitments from this company and this project are the commitment to quality. This is intended to be the single best asset in the portfolio. This will be the corporate headquarters of Benderson Development Company. This is a mixed-use project that will include office. I want to talk about adjustments for a second, just as an illustration. You know, we have a requirement in our development order that we work with you on a park plan. Sort of generic, you know, park plan. We're going to work on the park, got 400 acres of beautiful water there. What do you do? So we start working on it. And because of enthusiasm and the ability to be flexible and the adjustments that Paul and his team brought forward, we now are on the cusp of a world-class rowing facility. We redesigned the location of the roadway. We made the lanes for the crew to be the proper size. We now understand that the international rules are changing for rowing facilities like this to mirror a requirement that you have an adjacent project that provides the support that is necessary for a rowing event of international scope. That support requires hotel, retail, restaurant, parking, the types of things, all of which that we've committed to in terms of this project. And so there's been a very active period of time. Now, make no mistake, we don't like to come back to our regulators for amendment of ordinances. That's not our primary goal. We want to implement a project, and that's what we try to do every day. But these revisions are necessary today, and we want to put them into a context so we can have a dialogue about them. But first and foremost, Commissioner Thaxton and other members, I want to say something about mixed use. It's not simply the developer saying to you, we desire to do a mixed-use project. It's not some inferential language in a development order that suggests this will be a mixed-use project. It's much more than that. Your comprehensive plan was amended following some administrative challenges and legal proceedings several years ago that identifies this project, 276 acres, as special planning area number 1. And there is an ordinance that was adopted 2008, Ordinance 33, which was amended and has been subsequently incorporated into your comprehensive plan, that identifies and requires, as a matter of comprehensive planning, that this be a mixed-use project. There simply is not a question about that. Now, timing is another question, Commissioner, and it's important to talk about that. But the totality of the mix of uses is not a question. We're not seeking to change that, and if we wanted to change that, we would need to seek a comprehensive plan amendment, which, of course, is not on the table and is a much more extensive understanding. So that is a commitment, and it's not from inferential language. It's from the biggest constitution that you can impose in the context of land use, and that is your comprehensive plan. As the staff ably presented to you, there are 3 specific requests. 2 are rather technical. They go to the question of flexibility, where you design and how you accommodate all the uses on the site. And to the best of my knowledge, both staff and public, there hasn't been any comment made about the addition of the word commercial to residential on the map and the elimination of the acreage, which is a little bit of an artificial constraint. So I'm not going to deal with that, if you don't mind, although I will. It just seems to have been vetted and seems to be one of those technical provisions that we need to seek the change. So the primary change today, and really the sole change after you get past those 2 technical ones, is to eliminate a requirement imposed by development order as a condition of development that we bring forward 437 community housing units by June of 2014. And those units would have prices ranging generally from $221,000 to $252,000. That's what the condition is. We are asking you to eliminate that condition for the window ending with the build-out date by ordinance and statute for a couple of reasons. So the answer, the statement that I'm making now is why we're asking you to do this. The first is that our business plan suggests the goal of accelerating the non-residential elements of the project on a phased basis. But the first phase would be the non-residential elements. Parenthetically, in another agreement, we've already committed to building hotel and building 200,000 square feet of commercial uses on an accelerated basis. That commitment remains. That will be part of the accelerated project. Our additional desire is to accelerate the location and commitment of certain department stores, sometimes speculated about in the press, but it's good speculation. And we're committed to having them commit to us, this project, and more importantly, this community. One of the things that we have to deliver to them as part of the commitment is certainty that we have performed or in a position to perform all of the development order conditions. We have to demonstrate to a phalanx of lawyers and business people around the country that we have met all of these commitments that are imposed by our regulators. And the most important regulation is the development order. Of course, there are a myriad of underlying permits, swift mud and drainage and other permits that we need to comply with. But the question consistently is asked of us as to how we would eliminate or provide the certainty and no encumbrances that would ensnare any of these department stores or other retailers. And they look at it from the standpoint not only of the initial construction, but they look at it for life cycle. Over their 40, 50, or 70-year relationship in this building, if they seek to amend their building, if they seek to have remodeling permits or something like that, is there a condition that they would not then have performed? The department stores have no intention of participating in the residential components of this project. So that's our immediate dilemma. The second reason for the why is this. We have studied the marketplace, and there have been two studies now presented to your staff. One, an inventory analysis that was completed largely by us with the assistance of local real estate professionals, basically sort of an MLS analysis. And there haven't been substantive questions raised about the effectiveness of that analysis. However, after the Planning Commission meeting, we had another study commissioned by Metro Study, which is in fact a very technical, able consultant that has confirmed the initial analysis that we did and reached some other fairly significant observations. The representative is here if you want to dig into that report. But in summary, there is simply no market demand for the type of housing units for which you've committed us to build. And moreover, the market is actually significantly less than those. And the period of time for which we can be certain that that will exist is extended through 2018. In 2018. And so the why for our request is we need to develop certainty. We need to make certain that we can have a project that is encumbrance-free, and there isn't a market need for the housing at this time, and there won't be through 2018. But additionally, and this isn't done in just a vacuum, we have worked carefully with you and your professional staff to work on some of the essential elements of public policy that are important. For example, I know that the county has participated in the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, which is essentially a federal grant of funds a couple of years ago. And one of the criteria for the expenditure of that money had to do with location to public transit, to the MCAT and SCAT lines. And those monies expended in Sarasota County were prioritized in a way that would provide assistance through public transit. Our project has made a significant commitment to public transit in the form of a transfer station that we have committed and will build and will locate and will operate on the site in conjunction both with SCAT and MCAT. So it's a part of the regional solution and very, very responsive to the issues that are presented. Now, I want to make no mistake about this. In 2007, myself and other members of our team stood before you with the greatest optimism about how we were planning to go forward with this town center. And you might recall that it was a little tough, but you were firm, and we agreed as a condition of the development to bring forward these community housing units. And that was absolutely our intention at that time. As a matter of fact, if you look at the aerials, you'll see that virtually every piece of land on this property has been improved in some way. We have replaced the FPL power lines at considerable expense. We have completed the roadway network, including the roundabouts that we committed to you, the DeSoto Road extension to Honore, the Honore improvements at University, the improvements to University in front of the site and at the interstate. And we have completed all of those commitments, and we recognize what they are. As it relates to the housing issue, it is true that the market has managed the issue. And just like we've adapted in the park and we've adapted to the realities of the transportation network, we also need to adapt to the housing issue. And we're asking you to assist by granting the ordinance revision that we request. But most importantly, Commissioners, I understand that the way you need to look at this is as a policy question for Sarasota County, not for this project, but for the county and its citizens. And I submit to you, and we submit to you, that our goals and the community goals are in alignment on this point. We have, in addition to the two reports I've mentioned to you, spoken often with people in the community that are attempting to earn a living in housing. And what they tell us is do not artificially compete on a site-specific basis with other projects that are going forward in the community. Moreover, individual residents that now desire to sell their homes that they never really understood would be as affordable as they are today would be in direct competition with the new housing product that you would require us to build under this commitment. So the rank and file citizen that is identified in our reports, over 1,000 strong in the affected area, will find themselves in direct competition with this type of product that we would be required to bring forward. It doesn't seem to us that at this time is the right policy consideration. And as I've suggested to you, this condition will last until 2018. However, in final confirmation of your ability to manage this situation, please understand this. If you take this action today, and if at any time in the future we come back to you to extend the build-out date, it is a mandatory requirement of law that we assess and commit to whatever the affordable housing, community housing needs are at that time. This is a defined period for which we're asking this relief. And our studies suggest that through the 2018 period, it's the right decision to make. No one has challenged those studies. But what you will say to the community is that if this condition changes, and if the timing of this development is not pursued, then we will look at this again. And we have all the power of law and regulation to do so. And I think that is a consistent policy response to the people that have taken the time and energy to comment on this point. Now, specifically as it relates to timing, as I mentioned to you, we have a requirement for a mixed-use project, and we have a minimum 750 residential units. There was no particular timing imposed upon the project by ordinance or agreement as to when to deliver residential units, save and except the community housing units. So if you were to eliminate the timing, June 2014, for the delivery of community housing units, as we have requested you to do, there would not be an independent time obligation for bringing forward housing, whether it be affordable community market or higher than market or good market or something like that. So the specific answer to your question is that would be determined by the marketplace. If you ask us in 2007, which was the good marketplace, we would have said to you, like many developers of residential condominiums, both in the downtown area and other outlining areas of the county, it's residential, baby. That has changed. And we're struggling and clawing and scratching to bring these department stores to Sarasota. And that's what we want to do. We want them to augment the hotels that we're going to build, and we want that to be consistent with the new FISA regulations for the international rowing. And it all ties together. We need this accommodation, and we're happy to answer any specific questions and hope that our presentation illuminated a response to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, you may. We do have at least one commissioner who wants to ask some questions. If you'll stay, please.
Mr. Vogler, other than referring to the acreage deletions as I didn't write it down, but something like an unnecessary technical item, there really wasn't much explanation to it. I think I'd like to hear a little bit more explanation as to what is problematic about the acreages today that was not problematic in 2007 when they were incorporated into the agreement, because I don't really see them tying into the community housing units relevance much at all.
Yeah, they're not really tied at all to housing per se. I think what happened... Why were they important then and now they're not? No, either then or now. And so what happened is, as you go through the process of a comp plan amendment, which we did, and a rezoning that we did, we were preparing legal descriptions and so forth. And I think that this just got carried forward into the ordinance. And under one binding site plan, you say, well, that's okay. But if you need to present a new binding site plan to the board, which we will, maybe the acreages will change, or they'll certainly be relocated. And so I think it's more of a site planning question. And, you know, understand, of course, you have a binding site plan criteria here in Sarasota County. And one of the things that we'll be doing over the next few weeks and months is to bring forward an amended binding site plan for your consideration and approval. And our task on that, Commissioner, is to take the commitments that we've made both by comp plan and ordinance and take the demands of the marketplace and our prospective tenants and users and meld them into a site plan that can work, that continues the pedestrian-friendly, sustainable, park once philosophies that we have embedded into this project. And that's a challenge because some people would do things differently, and we've made various commitments to you that we'll perform. And blending and melding all of that together is a challenge that we'll bring forward to you. But we don't need the acreage statements.
Okay. Anything further? Thank you. We'll move on to the public. I'm going to call a few names, and, you know, if you're not up front, move up front because you can tell when your name's coming next. The first speaker will be John McGruder, will be followed by Anthony Sawyer, Cathy Antunes, Larry Lieberman, Pat Neal, and Dan Lobeck. Mr. McGruder.
Good afternoon. I'm John McGruder, and unlike in the past when I've come before you on issues like this, I'm not representing Sarasota United for Responsibility and Equity. I'm representing myself. If I were to look at a short answer, I would go with the Planning Board's response and deny the request. But I do think the world has changed. I think there are a lot of points that they made that are accurate, and I'm more inclined to agree with the Sarasota Herald Tribune this morning, and that there needs to be some kind of consideration given. Saying that, though, I spent this last weekend, a large part of it, rewriting a report and recommendations for the Sarasota Suncoast Coalition partnership that's working on a 10-year plan to end homelessness and prevent it. There are two, in that housing subcommittee report, there will be 2 reports on recommendations on housing, 2 on finance, and 2 on public policy. And I think the latter 2 are particularly important today. The first one really has to do with leadership. And it was a new recommendation that I added just this weekend, and the rest of the group agreed. And it really was to put the onus initially on the Sarasota City Commission, primarily because they have the largest number of homeless people. That said, there's no question but that there's also an issue in South County, and there's an issue throughout the county. These people need homes, and the city and county need to play a leadership in partnering, bringing together the private sector, the churches, the nonprofits, community foundations, and the rest to be able to afford the housing and other issues that we have that are required. That said, I'm a little bit concerned about the city. They're relatively new. You folks have been in your seats a little bit longer, with one exception, of course. And I'm not sure where they're going to go with this. They've recently put up for sale, because of their financial problems, a property that was earmarked for the Community Housing Trust. And instead of retaining that, they want to sell it, somewhat not unlike the comments that were just made, in competition with others that are already selling property in the Rosemary District. So although I want to start there, I think ultimately that leadership responsibility has to come here, which the report will also say, and I suspect you'll see that in the next couple of months. The second recommendation for public policy had to do with requirements that we may want to revisit. Again, trying to address the supply side of the issue. There's no question that there's still a demand there. The supply side, however, is lacking, despite the fact that there's lots of very affordable housing. People don't have jobs, and if you don't have jobs, you can't afford it. And if the jobs that you have are underpaying what you need to pay rents, then you can't afford the houses anyhow. So we still have an issue there. So we've asked you to revisit things like down payment programs and whether or not they can be done better, granny flats, a lot of other things, particularly the Community Housing Trust. But I think that this proposal falls within that realm. And because of that, I should also comment and compliment this group. Carolyn Mason, of course, is on co-chair of our group that's going to be presenting this plan, and I've seen both Commissioner Thaxton and Commissioner Barbette at the meetings, whereas none of the city commissioners have attended. I have seen Mr. Bartolotta there, and also his deputy, Marlon. But I know you're attentive, and I know you're interested, but this is one of the places where the shoe stops right today. And I think that regardless of what you do, you'd ought to look at some kind of my recommendation, if I were in your position, would be to come up with a median ground. Maybe 473 is too much. I certainly agree that building at that housing price level is probably not appropriate. What I'd rather see is perhaps a reduced number to be more accommodating from 473, but also lower the amount of the price of the homes. Get it down so that people can really afford it, that are closer to the 80 to 100% of average median income instead of 120. 120 doesn't get it. Banks are going to have difficulty loaning to people below that, and we know it. So I encourage you to do that, and thank you for your time.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
John. I always have a great deal of respect for your comments, and you were with the federal government for a considerable number of years, right?
25 years.
Right. And you touched on something that to me is the heart of this, re-examining public policy. and looking at the underlying purpose of that public policy. And if circumstances change, would it be your suggestion that you adjust that public policy?
Absolutely.
Right. And in this case, and you made the comment that what good does it do to have affordable housing when there are nobody to put in that housing because there's no jobs? So would it be fair to say that the underlying public purpose right now might be job creation?
Absolutely.
And jobs.
Absolutely, that's true.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anthony,
Excuse me, let me just make it, because I don't want to get that twisted around.
No, I know. I didn't mean to twist it.
They're obviously going to be creating a lot of jobs. But I think one of the things that the people that are making this presentation need to understand as well, that regardless of what they are trying to build and the jobs that they'd be creating, for people to be able to live here and to shop in their malls, to buy the houses that they're going to be selling, we need to have, I want to have in my older age, and I'm getting old enough now, Medicare is right around the corner, I want to have people here that are service-oriented, that can provide the hospital service care that we need, that can mow the lawns, that can deliver the paper, all those things, and we don't have that if we don't have the affordable housing, and there is a lack of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Anthony Sawyer, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Anthony Sawyer. I'm the President of the Meadows Community Association, and I have signed the card. The Meadows Community Association has strongly supported Nathan Benderson Aquatic Park, the North Cattleman Project, and the University Town Center. All of these projects are greatly beneficial not only to the Meadows but to the community in general. The goal of building the so-called community housing is laudable, but it has to be balanced with the current real estate market condition. By way of example, in the Meadows alone, we have a great number of housing units available for sale at present time that would fall within the definition of community housing. In fact, a lot of them could be called affordable housing. Completion of the SIPOC project will provide for the construction of a large transfer station that can handle multiple buses from both SCAT, SCAT, and MCAT. This facility will cost upward of $350,000, not including the value of the property upon which it's going to be built, which is about 1 acre of prime commercially zoned real estate. In addition to the construction of the SIPOC will create, the construction will create about, 250 jobs. The mall itself will employ 2,500 people. So the construction of the mall, in essence, is going to generate jobs for people that can then buy and use housing in the area. The decision that this commission is facing today is not an easy one, and neither was the decision on the renovation of the baseball stadium. But I'm confident that the commission will arrive at the correct decision. All I know is that several development projects in or near downtown Sarasota were not able to be built, were abandoned, or were never started due to governmental regulations and requirements. I am hopeful that the commission and the Benderson Corp will find a solution so that the University Town Center project can go forward. Now, on the lighter side, and in conclusion, my wife told me that she'll hold me personally responsible if she's not able to add to her substantial shoe collection if Nordstrom is not available at the University Town Center. And I think that one, I take it seriously. I know the wrath of that lady.
Now we get to the heart of the matter.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Cathy Antunes?
My name's Cathy Antunes. I signed a card, and thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Lewis. It's nice to see you at the table, and thank you for being our interim administrator. I think it's Mr. Vogler, if I'm saying his name correctly. I appreciated hearing his comments about this issue. I'm really here because it seems to me to be an emotional issue about affordable housing and doing the right thing for the community. So it's something that that grabs people's attention. So I have the comments to read, and then wanted to ask about the studies that have been referenced. I mean, the question to me is it in the best interest, the long-term interest of our community to release Benderson development from this commitment, a contractual commitment, it appears to be, to build 437 affordable housing units? Is it in the best interest of the community to weaken, it appears to weaken, the project's mixed-use nature? When the Planning Commission comes out in unanimous recommendation against something, that certainly grabs the citizens' attention. So Benderson, the project at University, Fruitville, and I-75 have received the benefit of significant public resources, public dollars directed to the rowing facility, which I think has value, that project, as well as road construction. It appears that much of the work has been assigned rather than put out to bid. In the wake of recent procurement issues, it could be a prudent thing to revisit that. I believe that was a January decision to forego a bidding process. But as a result of a DRI, and in return, it appears for the public support maybe of these development projects, Benderson Development committed to building affordable housing. So please consider the long-term interests of the community. And when I say that, I'm talking about 10, 20 years, not just the immediate future. The county has a worthy goal of creating mixed-use communities, and there's a discipline that's required to do that. And I'd ask how these, to carefully consider and explain to the public how these changes benefit that goal, or if they undermine that goal. Specifically, when I was sitting and listening to how there are studies showing that, I guess my main point is everything changes. There was a 2000 study showing we needed affordable housing by 2014. It's 2011. Things have changed quite a bit. 7 years from now, in 2018, I like to look at a study saying that things are going to remain static and there still won't be a need. There may be, and I'd ask you to consider that when you're making your decision.
Okay, thank you. Larry Lieberman?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am standing.
Larry.
I'm Larry Lieberman. I live in Lido Shores here in Sarasota. I'm going to give you 5 minutes of knowledge that has taken me 37 years and most of my hair to acquire. I'm president of the Barrington Group, which is a apartment development, ownership, and management company that owns multifamily housing all over the United States. Not only that, but we own and manage and have built all forms of housing, from luxury properties to market rate properties to 221 HUD D4s, senior affordable, normal affordable, and Section 8. That's a pretty good spectrum of over 4,000 units that we own and develop, and have over the 37 years built and developed 8,000 units. I would love to see this community housing element eliminated from their requirement to build. And I got a few reasons I'm sure you're going to ask me why. Of all the things we've learned in 37 years, it is that the market tells us what to build and what not to build. We can't tell the market what it should have. And we need the market to tell us, because we have to make mortgage payments, we have to pay for the development, and it has to make economic sense. Not 15 years from now, not 10 years from now. It's got to make economic sense today. And today, out there in Sarasota, Manatee County, and even all over the country where we have properties, the market is abominable. Rents are the lowest I have ever seen in the business. Many apartment developers literally cannot stay afloat. I would like to does this thing work? I mean, I know it works. But could you do that? Elmo?
It'll be on in just a moment.
All right. I want to show you some of the things that we do. You are looking at a property in Anderson, Indiana that was an affordable housing built project. That's what it was when we found it 7 years after its construction. This is what we did to it.
Nice.
I would like to show you another affordable housing project that was built as an affordable housing project. Can you see that? That's how we found it. That's what we did to it. Why? How did it get that way? Because the market would not support affordable housing. When the market is good, people can't qualify for the affordable housing. When the market is bad, all housing is affordable housing. We have apartment rents today that are lower than what your affordable housing rents are going to be. We formed a partnership with Clayton County Housing Authority back in the early 90s to buy a property from the RTC. Remember the RTC? One of the requirements is that we have 50% market rate, 25% low-income affordable, and 25% very low income. When Atlanta, which is the market area we're in, was doing real well, we couldn't find people for the very low income because it was too low. When the market turned bad, all the rents in North Atlanta were so low that we were renting apartments in South Atlanta cheaper than the affordable housing rents. And that's how a property turns up like this. So I am opposed to affordable housing in this area when the market is not right. And I agree with Mr. Vogler's assessment that it's going to be years before the market turns around. If you require affordable housing now, you very may likely see this picture in Sarasota, and we may very likely be called upon again to do something about it. Now, that's a more global view of our company, of how we look at projects. On a local level, you may know me as a developer of Carolina Landings and Savannah Preserve out on Cooper Creek and Honore. Very nice properties. I, as a property owner out there, don't want to see more competition from more apartments that are sub-market apartments, sub-market rate apartments. We are trying desperately out on that part of town to raise rents, to get rents back to a normal level, a level we can sustain our properties. If we introduce affordable housing rents in that market, assuming that they are even less than what we're charging, we will never get where we need to be. So as a property owner in this area, we do not need more competition in that area. So my closing remarks are, we don't need affordable housing and won't for a while. The market dictates when we need it. Let's just listen to the market.
Thank you. Pat Neal.
Tough act to follow, Pat.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Pat Neal. I'm also standing. My address is 8210 Lakewood Ranch Boulevard in Manatee County. I have been sworn. About 7 years ago, our firm passed the Paver Company as our region's largest and oldest builder and developer. We built about 13,000 lots in Manatee and Sarasota County, about 6,000 single-family homes, and about 2,000 condominiums of the form which we are discussing today. I came to talk a little bit about the housing market, which I guess I would say was my only area of particular expertise. And I'd like to say clearly that the homes that are before you at this time are neither necessary nor saleable. They're not necessary, as we have 5,200 sitting single-family homes for sale in the Manatee and Sarasota MLS. The Neal Company builds and sells homes in Manatee County. Commissioner Mason, you've been in those homes. Still today, 3 years later, at $110,990. We build and sell homes in Sarasota County, in Englewood, in your district, Commissioner Robinson, from $159,000, but today we offer concessions so you can buy them at $151,500, and prices are dropping. When we start a new Blackburn settlement, we'll start at about $130,000, about half the price of the 100% AMI. In our new apartment complex, We've been trying to pro forma apartments at about $1.05 per square foot per month. However, these apartments, if built in accordance with the plan that's before you, a 4-story concrete frame plan, would cost about $1.60 per square foot per month. So you'd be requiring the Benderson company to build something that was unnecessary in the respect that we currently build and sell homes unassisted for about half the price, and unsaleable and unrentable because no one would take them. They were a perfectly good public policy decision for 2006. I respectfully say it would not be a good public policy decision for 2011. I'll close by something of which I'm not an expert. It would be about jobs. Our community used to have about 21,000 people in the construction industry. After all, we are, as a transfer payment economy, all I do is build homes for people who have Social Security payments. But we've dropped the number of construction workers from 21,000 to 8,000 in 5 years. We've also given away or scared away 11 industries in northern Sarasota or southern Manatee County. 5 boat builders, Donzie, Wellcraft, Manatee, Chris-Craft, Alden Industries, Hystat, Milton Roy, Alden, I think I said Alden Industries, the eyeglass maker Serengeti. We also gave away the marketing department of Tropicana to Chicago and the finance department to White Plains. We've given away 4,500 good jobs in my town just in the last 5 years. What we need now today is for the people who are working, the drywall people, I'm going to go off agenda a little bit. When I go out the back door of my office, Commissioner Patterson, there's almost always a tradesman waiting to get a job on my house. And I don't mind saying what these people need to do, what the Benderson Company can do, is provide jobs for those people. So I respectfully say that the best policy decision you can make, I believe, for Sarasota County at this time is allow them to go forward with something that's good, a retail center, and let them defer from current consideration a project that can be neither built profitably nor sold successfully. Thanks for giving me this time.
Hey, thank you. Dan Lobeck, last speaker.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Again, I welcome our interim administrator. Glad you're on board. And I think this may be the first time I'm before Commissioner Robinson as a county commissioner, maybe the second. 4 years ago, a grand bargain was made with Benderson Development. Property that at that time was designated primarily for jobs, for high-paying jobs as a major employment center, was changed so that most of the office was stripped away, all of the industrial was stripped away, and almost 1 million square feet of retail commercial was allowed, so that the mall that was the principal objective of the developer would be permitted. But there was a trade-off for that: affordable housing, community housing, and mixed use. With respect to mixed use, which I would suggest is at the heart of this, you're effectively eliminating mixed use. Commissioner Babetta, just because the phrase mixed use is in there is meaningless without numbers. You can have 2 houses and a huge mall, and that's a mix. There's no definition of mixed use in any of the documents that you've been citing. What's important is the acreage and the timing. Now, for Mr. Vogler to say that as to the acreage, they're not really tied to housing at all is disingenuous. What it now requires is 179 acres of commercial and 97 acres of residential. That has something to do with housing. It requires a significant housing component. If they want to make a minor adjustment to move the mall a little bit in one direction, make a minor adjustment, but they're eliminating it completely so that you can build commercial throughout what is now designated as acreage. And I would suggest there's a flume question, too, because a lot of that is designated on the comprehensive plan for residential, not for commercial. So I think there's an issue on the comprehensive plan that's not been addressed by staff. But it's substantive. There's a requirement for major residential component. The timing would be completely eliminated. Contrary to what you heard from staff, Mr. Vogler was very direct and honest in telling you that if you pass this, there will be, quote, no timing requirement whatsoever for the residential. So that mall goes in, that mall is completely constructed, and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting for any meaningful mix of uses. with regard to affordable housing, your Planning Commission unanimously, both for the mixed-use requirement that I just articulated and for the community housing requirement, voted to recommend denial. It is rare that a group of people with such a very different perspectives on growth and development will be unanimous about something. But they felt it's important to keep this community housing component for the longer term so that the needs of the people in this community will be met. And even with regard to present needs, if you look at their studies, they're saying there's 597 affordable dwellings throughout the entire county north of Clark Road, all the way to the west and all the way to the east. That's not that many. And that there's about half as many within the affordable range that's dictated by this plan for rent. That's not that many. There continues to be a need. And this is not a minimum that can be charged. They can charge less, as to Mr. Neal's argument about what's marketable. They can build apartments or houses that have been very marketable for Mr. Neal and his developments. There's a market for him. There's going to be a market for these. This basically would be an abandonment of the public interest for a big, influential, generous developer. And you know how strongly I feel about that. I feel basically the issues are the same before you as they were before the Planning Commission. The only difference is planning commissioners don't get campaign contributions. And the Bendersons, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, that I am concerned, and you know a lot of other people out there concerned, about the influence that has on public policy. It shouldn't have any. You should be guided by the same imperatives that your planning commissioners were. But that is a difference, because they're very generous when it comes to their contributions. You look at the reports, it's Benderson, 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 and their corporations on top of it. It should not be a factor. I ask you to remove that from your mind in making this decision, and only make a decision based on what is in the public interest. Having residential near the stores are going to help the stores. It's going to provide additional customers. It's going to help mass transit. I mean, you're talking about this being a major mass transit hub without any residents there, potentially no residents or no residents for a decade. That makes no sense. This is good for the home builders in terms of their construction. There are builders that don't do commercial development. This mall is going to come about whether or not you approve this elimination of public interest requirements or not. They're committed to proceed with it as a condition for getting the road to open up their land for traffic in North Cattleman. They are going to proceed. You're going to be able to have your wife buy these shoes. That's not the issue here. The issue is whether this is mixed use, because there's no requirement for timing otherwise. Mr. Vogler told you that. The acreage requirements would be out the window, so that residential becomes commercial, and you don't get mixed use. This commission has stood for mixed use for years. Commissioner Babetta, you've been at the lead of fighting for mixed use. So this isn't a question about benefiting some influential developer. This is a question about doing what's right for the public interest. The choice is clear and stark, and a lot of us are very anxious to see which direction you go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had promised a break at this point, and we did have one more person sign up, but I'm going to fill my promise, and we are going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you, guys. I'm calling this meeting back to order, and we're still in taking public input, and I have 2 more cards, one from Bob Waechter, who will be our next speaker, and he will be followed by Bob Hamilton.
Madam Chairman, Bob Waechter, I've signed a card. Thank you very much. I'm just up here for a few minutes. I'm not a developer. I don't have any expertise in the area. I just am a big admirer of Benderson development, what they've done in our community. And I'm excited about the idea of finally, after a promise made almost 6 years ago, that Benderson Development International will be headquartered in Sarasota, Florida. Really, not Sarasota, Florida, just because it's 42343, but Sarasota, Florida, inside the county. Benderson have proven themselves to be very, very good corporate citizens. My first experience with them was approaching them in the early 2000s when we were doing development at the airport, and I've related this to you in the past, that we reached out to them for some expertise on how we could do some of our corporate land planning on the airport campus.
And they were very accommodating. They came right down. Mr. Benderson, Senior Mr. Benderson, came down and met with us. I believe Mr. Vogler was with him, and gave us some good pointers that we're still using today. Another opportunity I had to reach out with them was when I was involved with the Pines of Sarasota, the foundation and the elderly care facility. And we reached out to them, and again, they were very generous. They were forthcoming. They helped us. They provided expertise. They provided funding for us. There was no payback for that. Nobody knew it. It was kind of quiet. They just did it. And I have never approached them, and I approach them judiciously. I don't run to them with everything, but I do approach them. I've never been rebuffed. They are just very, very good corporate citizens. To force a developer to build a product that there's no demand for in the market flies in the face of common sense. It's been said here by people far more qualified than I. I am glad I came today, though, because I got the opportunity to see Attorney Dan Lobeck, who I have the highest regard for, demand that more units be built. I never thought I would live to see that, and I expected. In Hades, Satan is breaking out the sweaters about this time. So I encourage you to please grant this change that they're asking for. Let's get this development built, this industrial or commercial development built. Let's get the sales tax revenue coming in. Let's get the ad valorem tax revenue coming in, and let's get some jobs in the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bob Hamilton? You're okay? All right. Okay, that concludes the public portion. Do we have questions for staff before the developer gets the opportunity to rebut?
Yeah.
Commissioner Thaxton.
If I can get someone that would remind me what the price range of a home would be for an occupant that is less than 100% of the mean area income.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mary Beth Humphreys, Community Housing Manager, and I have signed a speaker's card. Commissioner Thaxton, could I have your question again, sir?
Yeah, 100% of mean area income would equate into what price range of home?
Can I have the Elmo, please?
This is based on what interest rate?
This is based on 5% interest rate. And 100% area is in the pink. This is the number of family size.
So family from 2 to 3, 2 to 4 would be between $200,000 and $272,000.
That's correct. That's the maximum mortgage. That mortgage includes taxes and insurance. So it's not just the mortgage itself. It also includes taxes and insurance.
All right, so that's probably a 220 to 290 price home.
Yes, sir.
With minimal down payment, assuming you get a loan like that.
Assuming a stable interest rate.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions from staff?
And that was the lowest of the price ranges that were originally a requirement of this development order? I'm looking at page 763. 50% of the community housing shall be in the 100% of mean area income, and then 50% shall be in the area less than 120%.
And they could go to any of these income ranges on these charts, whether if they're going to build a single bedroom facility or a family size up to 6 or 7 with 3 bedrooms. So it's going to depend on what type of structure that they're building, but anywhere within those income ranges that I showed on that chart. So it could go down as low as $172,000 up to a family of 8 of $380,000 in the 100% range.
Okay.
It goes by the family size. You don't just do one price range.
That's why I asked range.
For one unit.
Okay. Commissioner Barbetta?
Yeah, I have a question for Mark on the transit facility. Can you tell me a little bit about that, the commitment by the developer, the requirements and approximate costs?
That is a development contract that's in place. I believe the number is, well, I have that available if you want to put it on the Elmo, but it is for the design and construction of a complete transfer facility at a cost targeted at $300,000. We have a commitment letter in the package today that indicates that they'll commence that by October of this year.
How do we build that for
That was my
$300,000?
next question. Who absorbs the cost over $300,000 if it comes in?
That's solely Benderson's responsibility.
Or whatever the cost comes in at.
And it's already creeping up a little bit. The people at SCAT have indicated that they would like to see some additional components put into that project.
And they're working with SCAT
Yes.
on that? Okay.
So the obligation exceeds $300,000. Because, I mean, I just had this conversation with our previous county manager because there is a SCAT transfer station proposed for Cattleman, where the estimates have come in at $1.3 million, and I asked, well, what was the downtown transfer station, and it was comparable to that, despite the fact that I remembered it to be lower.
My understanding is that this would be a little smaller in size than the downtown facility, maybe similar to the Gulfgate facility.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have one for Mr. Roddy. I still find it very confusing in trying to figure out whether there is any obligation to make this into a real mixed-use project, which means some residential, whatever the price. They apparently have to build a minimum of 700 something by what we've been told is in this agreement. I'm not sure I've actually seen that in the material that we have, but I assume that it's there. So they build them all, they build out everything, and there's no acreage that isn't built on because there's no designated acreage for residential at all, and then they're gone. Or even if they're not gone, they're still here, but the land's been built on, there's no residential. How do we force something if there's no deadline whatsoever? It seems like a judge could say, well, you didn't say by when, maybe they'd do it by 2050.
You do have a build-out date, but as we've seen, those things get extended. What you're seeing is the provision in the DRI, which just describes this project and says there is a minimum of 750. There is not a timing set. There is not a phasing set for that, other than the subset of affordable housing.
Is there, what is the build-out date?
I have that, Alan. It's December 31st, 2014.
Well, that's pretty close. So if we didn't extend it, do you feel like they'd have a legal obligation to at least?
Imagine
may
trying
have
to
a legal
force.
obligation?
I mean, it is written here that they shall build it. But at that point, are you going to take an enforcement action to compel building of 750 units? That may be a difficult enforcement action, to tell you the truth. But we're not there. It's hard to speculate exactly how that would work. We've not dealt with this before because usually development orders have maximum, and people just don't build everything they're allowed to do. And when this was done, as Mr. Polk has reminded me, they've anticipated it would all pop out of the ground fairly quickly, and there wasn't really a question at that time as to whether it would all get built or in what order. It didn't matter. It was all going to be done fairly quickly.
Mr. Robinson?
I seem to recall when I was on the Planning Commission us wrestling with that idea many times on DRIs, that it's just the way it works. It's not particular to this one. I mean, there's not necessarily a schedule for putting in the mixed use residential versus commercial. We had that discussion quite a few times over my 3 years on the Planning Commission. My recollection was that's how it works with these DRIs. There's no schedule for residential versus commercial. Is that correct?
Well, there is no schedule here other than a build-out date.
But that's typical.
I don't know how many have minimums. Build it, a minimum amount to be built. Usually it's a maximum, and then you're just done on that date. unless extended. That's what's different about this one, had a requirement of a minimum.
I don't know. I recall stuff having phases where you had to build this or that, you know, I mean, I've definitely seen that in the years that I've been on here. Certainly the last few years, people have built the residential first because the residential supported the other stuff. John?
Yeah, and that's kind of an artifact of the conditions then versus now.
Right.
Is no one envisioned in 2007 that we were going to have to put a requirement to build the residential units, you know, because that's where the money was. And so we didn't. And looking back now, maybe we should have. The only thing we put the timing requirement on was the community housing, and for obvious reasons, because we felt that that was where the pressure was needed at the time. And now, you know, the community housing requirements as prescribed in the development order are, you know, they are counterproductive. I'm sorry, that's not the price range of homes that you want to be putting into the market right now. I mean, if you do, just wait another 6 months for the next group of foreclosures to come, and bada bing, you got them. They're going to be there. And so this is just going to further exacerbate that complicated mess. But you know, that's why it was done that way.
Do we have any, Alan, as we approve the more specific development plans, do the staff have any prerogative to say, okay, you're building on all the land, where is the residential going to go for the 700 minimum?
They will have a binding site plan. They have a binding site plan now under the rezone. As they said, they're apparently going to be filing that because this area we're talking about with them down along the lake is currently zoned RMF. It's zoned multifamily, not commercial. So they have to rezone that to come in and develop it for commercial purposes. That will have a binding concept plan. And so the question is whether that sets out areas that are exclusively for residential purposes.
No, it doesn't. What we've got today, after we do what they say, assuming we do what they say, if we do what they say, or what they're asking for, there is no area that says residential. Everything says residential commercial.
That's in the DRI. They still have to rezone the property. That's another action they've got to follow up with. They've got to come through with a rezoning on this property.
Okay, and then at that point, they'll have to show us where the residential is going to be at least?
They're supposed to show that on a binding development concept plan. And if they set on an area exclusively for residential purposes, then that's what it's to be used for.
Okay, Commissioner Thaxton.
And I can't find it now, but in the paragraph, if somebody can remind me where the paragraph is where they struck the, I think it was where they took out the acreages.
That's section 1.10, Commissioner Thaxton.
Yeah,
What page is that?
On the iPad, though.
Should be 762 on your iPad.
Okay, I'm almost there.
And I can put that on the Elmo if I may.
Go ahead.
Well,
Put it on the Elmo. I'm talking to him. I know you'll go when you win.
Does he have it on the Elmo? Yeah, there you go. If you look, it does have some specificity with regards to the CG parser. Will still contain the upper story residential dwelling units. That's the only place where I find where it really has something that would be tied to the timing, because you have to build the upper story residential with the other things in the CG parcel.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for staff? All right, Mr. Vogel, you've got 5 minutes now, and if you need a little longer, that would be all right, but...
Thank you. I don't think that we will. I'd like to entertain any specific and additional questions, because I think in context, sometimes it looks differently, the decision-making for today, than maybe you read beforehand. I want to not be subtle about this. Our business goal is to bring department stores to this site and this community in Sarasota in the near term. We are meeting with them, we are talking to them, and we are asking for their commitment. This will be the first project in the country that these department stores have committed to post-2008. And we need this relief. The acreage question is not, Commissioner Thaxton, in any way clever or resulting in some planned result. What we want to do is capitalize in part on what's happened with the rowing facility and what will ultimately be lake integration, what will be pedestrian connections and access. This provides you a lot of different opportunities for how you might have a mixed-use project connected to a rowing facility than just having a high-rise residential building overlooking a 400-acre lake, which has its own attractiveness. But it's different. And so the acreage, when you go around those geographic areas, comes out to a very precise, I don't have it on, I don't know if it's on the Elmo, but a very precise, amount of acreage. That isn't relevant today, but that's not the equivalent of saying there won't be residential units. And let me follow up on the advice that Mr. Roddy gave to you, Commissioner Patterson. I want to be as explicit and clear as I can about this. We will bring forward to this board a site plan, rezoning plan if necessary, and a site plan that will show the residential units, their location, their connection to the project, and their number, and all of the other elements that go into a binding site plan. And I there's sort of a subtext here that we're trying to get out of something beyond what we're trying to get out of, okay? And I just want to try to diffuse that. I want to say to the public and to you as clearly as we can, we are trying to get out of a community housing commitment that we clearly and affirmatively made that doesn't now work and encumbers the property in a way that causes uncertainty that frustrates our present ability to commit and obtain the commitment of these department stores. That's end of story. And that's why we're here. We do have a requirement for a minimum of 750 units. There isn't a specific timing. That I don't have the occasion to look at every development order that's ever been issued, but I've done a few in my time. And I would say that Commissioner Robinson's instincts are correct, that generally these things are viewed as authorizations up to, and then the marketplace determines what the phasing and the timing and the priority would be. And that's how it's been done. In this case, because there was a specific need identified in 2007, we made a specific commitment for a specific housing type at a specific income level. And that was, I think we probably said at the time, we find that to be an extraordinary commitment just because of the way land use, usually a grant, not a have to, and we agreed to it. And so now we're asking to be relieved from that commitment, but this idea that it's not a mixed-use project is 100% alien to us. I just want you to know. When we hear it, when we read it, when we're asked the questions, it's completely contrary to our goals. And so those goals have not changed. And in very short order, we'll bring back to you the site plan that shows where these commitments are. And, of course, we'll be having partially the same discussion and asking for your support at that time. But please take this action today. It's important.
Commissioner Thaxton.
So, Mr. Vogler, you still have an obligation to build 750 units. What price range are they going to be?
They will be dictated by the marketplace. I mean, they may. I mean, if if we elected to build them today, Commissioner Thaxton, say, for example, Mr. Neal gratuitously came forward and said, I want to be the solution to the problem, I suppose they'd be 110.9. I mean, that's what, I mean, if you look, I heard Mr. Lieberman's testimony, and he talked about a project essentially across the street, and, those are substantially lower than the 100 and 120, of AMI. I don't want to give away their marketing techniques.
Right. Well, I guess this is the point I'm trying to get to here. And I would agree, if you were to build them today, and probably if you were to build them anytime soon, they're probably going to be in that price range. So it's more like the market is going to drive you down, and the requirement is going to drive the price of homes up, which is the exact opposite consequences that we anticipated when this was first approved. So I guess what some of us are struggling with here is the scenario that Mr. Roddy has admonished us with, that this site could, and I guess what I'm trying to do now, I'm trying to fix something now that we didn't anticipate in 2007, and that is the construction of the site with no residential units. It is conceivable that the entirety of the site could be built without any residential units, and then at the end of the DRI build-out time, I mean, we really have no mechanism to force someone to build something. I mean, a contract for specific performance is one of the most, as you're a lawyer, I don't need to be telling you this, I mean, that is one of the most difficult things to pursue, and frankly, I don't think, I wouldn't even try it, because it would be so ridiculous for us to, at the end of the build-out period, to go to court and say, we're now going to force you to build 750 residential units in a shopping mall where it perhaps wasn't even structurally anticipated. So I guess what we're looking for is something at this stage of the game that will give the community the assurance that it is going to be a mixed-use facility, because if it is, I think the community housing question answers itself, because I think the market is going to drive not only prices of units that we required before, but actually even less than that. So that part of it, if we can take care of the assurances for the mixed use, then I think the community housing aspect of it is going to take care of itself, especially considering the desire for the developer to go ahead with the large commercial components now, which coincidentally happens to be a down residential market. And I'm just not, I want to go with you here, but I'm not getting that. And
I want to try to answer. I think you said it extremely well, and I don't think that the developer landowner's goals are in any way in conflict. So, but let me try to be as plain as I can. You can absolutely require us to plan for mixed use. The question that you've got two pieces of your question. You can absolutely require us to plan for it. The question is, can you and should you and have you required us to build it? Okay, those are two separate questions. But let's just make sure we cover the first one first. You absolutely can require that we plan for it, and we will. Period. So the chances of not looking at a mixed-use plan are zero. Now, the question is, can you require us to build it?
Right.
I would answer the question as a normal land use lawyer the same way you just did. It's very difficult for governments to require you to build it. That's why Ms. Robinson says, over the years we really haven't had the requirements of it. We're more authorizing as a regulatory body, and that's why this particular requirement was unusual. But and if you're asking me, and I think you are, well, why don't you just commit to when you're going to build the 750 units? I would say this to you. I really don't want to repeat the same fallacy that we did in 2007. That's what I would say, in honesty and candor. I don't know. I know we're going to plan for them. And I know that we want to bring forward residential uses on this property. And I'll tell you another thing. I know we want it to be successful, right? And those are the typical commitments that you get sitting in as this body. And we renew them.
Yeah.
You know, Alan, I have a recollection not of requiring residential to be built by a certain timing, but usually the shoe's on the other foot. In you know, all our years, it's the residential that's been the profit, and we've had folks come in with big residential development and required that certain amount of commercial be built by a certain time, you know, by a certain, not a year, but build out. This one's sort of difficult because the commercial's going to be built pretty quick. This isn't like a 10-year development. So I don't really know how. I mean, I guess I'd not feel real comfortable telling him you've got to build these units in 2014. I mean,
when? Pick your date.
Right, but I'm getting the feeling that when you come in for a rezone, you're going to have to reserve some pieces of land where you can show us where the residential is, and you're probably not going to be able to build commercial on those pieces. And, you know, I don't know what the will of the board would be if you came in, you know, 3 years from now and said there's still no residential market, obliterate, you know, whatever the rezone shows. Because I got to tell you something, when you came in here originally and you sold us, and we bought, you know, there was no pejorative associated with selling and buying here as a community. What you sold us was a mixed-use, new urbanism type of development, not an ordinary shopping mall. Mm-hmm. And that's why we said yes. And in fact, there weren't 3 votes for what you guys first came in with. It failed. And instead of letting you go away, we said, come back, you know, come back and try again, come back with something more innovative, and you did. And the mixed use of that was part of the innovation of what you were bringing us at the time. The affordable housing units, to me, you know, the price range we're talking about in here, it isn't affordable. And it isn't what people are building. So I guess it's only the mixed-use part of it that worries me, and I don't know what to say about that. I sure want you to build the mall. I don't want it to be a standard mall, but I want it to have the elements that we were basically conceptually promised when we bid into the whole design.
Commissioner, what you say is so correct. I mean, we're not walking away from that. Well, what I'd like to emphasize, though, in terms of the sale and the buy, it wasn't our plan to sell you something and have an economic tsunami and then not do it. Our plan, you know, we started site work. We ordered steel. We've spent, you know, millions of dollars really on infrastructure. I mean, the only way that you could justify that is if you plan to go forward with a plan. And so now what we're doing is scratching and clawing in 2011 to hope to bring department stores that will commit to this project so we can in fact do the next thing. And that isn't done.
Commissioner Thaxton.
Mr. Vogler, when we were having the discussion and the approval was ultimately gained, I can't remember the specifics, or I can't remember the details, but I can remember the specifics. And what we all agreed to that was going to be constructed here was a place where people could both work, live, and play. I mean, that was, I remember that very clear. And shop, of course, and shop. You know, we're going to have the office for some limited office. Good amount of retail was always anticipated on the, or at least was anticipated in this development approval. And clearly so was the residential component, because what we were thinking was when you build this center, you are going to have places for the people who worked there to live. And so it was anticipated that we were going to build this live-work environment where you would have an opportunity to live in the same place where you worked. And you could actually even shop there now, because there's also other restaurants and shop. So I think the market has done a great job of putting the price range of homes that you would build in line with, commensurate with the salaries that you're going to pay the people that are going to be working in your stores as managers and as sales clerks and those sorts of things. So that's the part of the mixed use which I still, again, I still see absent, and I'm looking for some assurance that when we do build these high-end, potentially high-end retail outlets, that the people that live in them or that work there are going to have a place within the development to live, because that was the basics of the original agreement, and I'm looking for assurance of that. Community housing aside, I think the market's taking care of that. But I guess all I'm doing is rephrasing what I said before and what Commissioner Patterson has already said. But it's like show me the houses.
Yeah, you know, I admire how smart you are. You really excel in your board, really, compared to a lot of the boards you see. I'm serious about that. It sounds very pandering, but it's true. I mean, you really understand the issue, okay? What's happened here, no change in concept, change in timing, right? So, Commissioner Thaxton, just as an intellectual exercise, and not in any way intended to be snarky at all, I mean, isn't it also true that we could have built 1,750 high-rise condominiums overlooking a beautiful lake and never built one commercial item? I mean, that's true, right? And you might say to me, well, you know.
I think somebody suggested that at the other hearing.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I
remember a comment like that coming from.
But you say, well, I want assurance that you're going to do the commercial. It's just, I think you sort of identify the Bendersons primarily as a commercial developer. And what we've said is that, and I don't want to offend anybody, it's not like residential is, you know, ubiquitous and all is the same. I think the Neal communities stand out, obviously. But to get these department stores on this site and this area in our community is radically different as a goal for a community than just to have another group of housing in some type. So I'm just saying, I mean, we can debate this a lot. I like it, but it's, you know, I think our goals are consistent with policy goals. I really believe that. And we'll come forward with a plan, and we'll show you what we're going to do. And that's good.
Mr. Roddy, their next step would be to come in with a rezone with a concept plan, right?
I believe so. That parcel on the lake is zoned multifamily.
Okay, and at that point, presumably they would have places designated where residential would go, right?
Well, they'll be the ones drawing the plan, but I think they would understand what you're saying about what you'd like to see on it.
Okay, well, I don't know where the other votes fall, but I guess I'm feeling like I'll give you guys a leap of faith, but I don't want to see something that's potentially going to be all commercial when it comes back to us. At any rate, at this point, if there are no other questions or comments from the board, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioner Robinson?
Move approval of proposed ordinance 2011-041, amending ordinance number 2006-080 and ordinance number 2009-056 as amended.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, Commissioner Robinson, do you want to speak to it?
Yes, I do. I was not on the commission back then. So I get to look at this a little bit differently than the rest of you do, and I get to look at it from the perspective of somebody who's been practicing in the area of foreclosure defense for the last couple of years, unfortunately. And I get to sit across from those folks who don't have jobs. And I agree with Mr. McGruder. If you don't have a need for affordable housing at all if you don't have a job. And my practice was primarily in Venice and Northport and Inglewood. And those folks would love to hop on a bus or drive up to university to have a job. I mean, the foreclosure rate down there is staggering, particularly in Northport. And those people can't leave their homes to move up to university. They can't. They literally can't because they're so far underwater. And they would love the opportunity to have a job to be able to pay their mortgage, and they can't. If that came in today as a brand new, if it was completely brand new and came before us today, I can tell you a lot of the folks in South County would be drooling over the jobs as a result of that. And when you're looking at over 1 out of 10 who would say that their short-term interests are being able to work and support their families over the long-term interests of affordable housing, it's hard to argue with that because they're staring you right in the face. So do we look long-term? Of course, but not to the extent that we ignore the jobless staring at us in the face right now. And the potential for those jobs, I believe, would be slowed down if we don't take out this community housing. I've also, watched that area. When I first moved to the area, I actually had an apartment for a couple months up in Lakewood Ranch with my husband when we first moved over here. And I saw what across the street at the Cooper Creek, what a disaster that was over there and what it looked like at that particular time. And it looked like a hole back there. And what was done with that area and the jobs that were created. And now I'm looking at that happening across the road. And I can't ignore jobs. I can't ignore them, and neither can the folks who want them right now. And the need to have those jobs, I believe, is greater than the affordable housing, which you can find amply in South County right now, by the way. So that's why I will be supporting this today. It's not lost on me, the comments of my fellow commissioners, but the job issue is weighing heavily on me, and is particularly for the constituents in the southern part of the county who would never be able to move up to university and would love the opportunity to be able to drive up there for a job. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was well stated. Along the same lines, when this policy was formulated 4 or 5 years ago, it was based on data at the time, and I think, as I mentioned to Mr. McGruder when he came up, things change, public policy changes, and it's incumbent on us to look at the facts and circumstances at the time. And in this case, a broader public benefit is the jobs and the economic development in the addition to the tax base. And I was trying to think of another instance when this has occurred recently with our board, and I couldn't, but the Herald Tribune editorial was ironic this morning that reminded me that it was in fact the Herald Tribune who did exactly this a few years ago with the city of Sarasota. I believe they got pretty good tax breaks when they built their building downtown to occupy it solely as their corporate headquarters for their employees. And the economic times changed drastically. And they went in and begged the city commission to change the rules and to remove the condition so they could rent the property out. And they got that condition removed, to the best of my knowledge. I haven't confirmed that yet, but I know they went to the well to do that. So I found it ironic when I read the editorial this morning that they were basically saying we shouldn't be doing this. But the way I look at it is, it doesn't, from an economics perspective, and that was my background, you don't do something that's not marketable. You don't build something that's going to sit there vacant. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to get things moving quickly, create the jobs, create the tax base, and I think in this situation it justifies the removal of the condition. Would I have liked to have seen possibly a contribution to the Community Housing Trust or something along that line? Possibly, but I don't think we could extract that, so that wasn't my prerogative to be able to ask for that. But I do think the circumstances are such to allow this to go forward. And I'm hoping, as Mr. Vogler stated there, when they bring their site plan in during the rezone, that we will see a true mixed-use development, and we will see the residential spelled out. And I do hope there are, as it showed in the development order, second-story apartments within the commercial.
Mr. Mason?
I share Commissioners Barbetta's and Robinson's concerns and comments. Like Commissioner Robinson, a part of my district has very high unemployment, and they would love to be able to get some of the jobs that will come out of a project like this one. I like it when government can be flexible and change as the times change. And I think that's what we need to do here. So I'll be supporting this motion. I would, though, like to see a contribution. As you all know, I'm involved with the 10-year plan to end homelessness, and I'm not ashamed to say, if it could happen, I would like to see a contribution made to implement that plan when it's, or to help implement that plan when it's done.
Commissioner Thaxton?
Well, I have really no intention of abandoning the affordable housing element of this plan. I will concede that I'm going to go about it in a little bit different fashion. I identify a little bit with Commissioner Patterson's last remarks, that I want to see the next binding development concept plan. I do believe that concept plan, well, actually, let me just phrase it in a very blunt way. I think that the Bendersons have made a commitment to mixed use. Mixed use includes residential. I expect to see residential in the very first development phase, and the market will require that a good percentage of that residential be not only at the 100 and 120th percentile, but actually much lower than that. And therein is where I expect to see the affordable housing component as well as the mixed use. And if it's not there, then we have a very serious problem.
Okay. All in favor of the motion on the floor, which is to approve what's before us, which would be ordinance 2011-041, amending ordinance number 2006-080 and ordinance number 2009-056, and the rest that's in 13A, and also approve the revocation of the development agreement with all the various entities that are listed under B. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion passes unanimously.